Today, I'm honored to introduce Ron, the founder and CEO of HOPE Neuron Therapeutics. HOPE Neuron is a pioneering neurobiology company dedicated to tackling ALS and other diseases. After losing his wife to Alzheimer's, Ron made it his mission to change the future of this devastating disease. At over 80 years old, he's leading a team that has developed Solantex, a first-of-its-kind device-enabled therapy designed to reprogram the immune system and slow down or stop disease progression without the use of drugs or stem cells. In preclinical studies, this therapy showed remarkable results in ALS mouse models with dramatic improvements in motor function and a promising shift in the immune response. Ron's story is one of love, resilience, and relentless innovation. Today, we're going to hear firsthand why HOPE Neuron is more than just science. It's a movement to bring hope and healing to families impacted by ALS. This is his story. Ron, can you tell us about your wife, her journey with Alzheimer's, and what was life like during those years?
Hang on. I had the fortune of having a gorgeous wife.
Yeah.
But she was the prettiest on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
In a world of takers, she was a giver.
Yeah.
And we had 50 plus years together. And it was an incredible journey. Her mother passed with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
And Sandy, in the back of her mind for many years, suspected that might be, an eventuality for her. And as time passed, we were living, frankly, in a little community on the Mississippi River called Natchez, Mississippi. It's an art community. Mm-hmm. And it's the oldest European settlement on the Mississippi River. It's older than New Orleans. But the reason we were there was not because of that. We were there because of the art community. And Sandy had a studio and a gallery. She was trained in Scottsdale, and she was frankly a pretty good artist. And she went down there and she was the best. So they all loved her. They loved her art, etc. And before the oil could dry, her stuff would sell. And it was the first time in her life, frankly, in our married life, that she didn't have children to worry about. Mm-hmm. Her husband wasn't dragging her around the globe.
Yeah.
And she got a time just to be selfish in the best sense of the word. It was not truly selfish, but to do what she really enjoyed doing. And that was just a splendid, splendid time with her.
How old was she at that time?
How old?
Yeah,
that was probably 10 years before she passed.
Okay.
8, something like that.
Okay.
So our oldest daughter is a nurse, and our oldest daughter owned and operated 3 care homes. Mm-hmm. Most of the patients in the care homes were suffering from Alzheimer's. So my daughter called me one day and said, "Dad, we're going to remodel our house, and we'd like to build a guest house in the back for you and Mom, because you can't do this alone. Yeah. You want to move here?"
Did the
it took me at least 10 nanoseconds to say, "Okay." And so we generally packed up and we moved to Phoenix. And
did she know why you guys were moving at the time? Like, did she know that Alzheimer's was settling in, or was this a premature?
Sandy was a woman of courage. She was not a blamer ever.
Yeah.
We had candid discussions about the realities that she faced. Mm-hmm. And in a general sense, her chin was always up. It wasn't Pollyanna. She knew what the deal was, but she was not a complainer ever. And so, yes, she knew what was happening. She very much was aware of that. Now, as the disease progressed, the reality of it became somewhat less over time, as everything else became somewhat less over time.
At what point did you decide to start building HOPE Neuron? Like this is where I'm curious, because you said that you were working at therapeutics. So were you working on HOPE Neuron while Sandy was going through these stages, or is it something?
Yeah, no, I was. Yes, I was working on the technology for it. We didn't have the name HOPE Neuron at the time.
I see. So you were working on the technology. So did you decide to jump into building the technology when Sandy was diagnosed with Alzheimer's? Or
You
were you
know,
working on
I think she probably had a formal diagnosis along the way, but we diagnosed it long before the doctors did.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
we knew what it was, and
Yeah.
she knew what it was.
Yeah.
There were two precious moments in that respect. One was she was sitting in her bed, and she was a woman of faith, and she was sitting there probably praying. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It was quiet, and I looked over, and there were tears running down,
Yeah.
and that was just that grabbed me. But she said nothing, no complaints,
Oh,
nothing
interesting.
at all. It was as if she was recognizing that her time was limited,
Mm-hmm.
and she would be leaving her friends and her family, and all the things that she loved, she would be leaving. And that reality was there, and she was dealing with it. But again, she didn't complain. All right, she dealt with it. Then, towards the end of her life, which was sometime after this, but within a year or two at the most, I would say, we had a routine. We'd get out of bed and get her cleaned, and she would come and eat, and then she would sit in this spot here. And I always insisted that she stand up by herself and turn around and sit in the wheelchair. I wanted her to get the bone loading. That's really important for the immunology. And she did that. But we got to a point where she couldn't do it. She couldn't stand up on her own. So the caregivers would come and pick her up, put her down, and so forth. Then we got to the place where she wasn't eating. And I called my daughter and I said, we got an issue here. Your mom is not eating. We need to get an IV. And the response was, no, Dad, when that happens, that means this is the end. And I swallowed. And I said, okay, I understand. I mean, that's not a surprise. I understand. And so they then basically put her in bed. And I don't know if you know what it's a disc kind of thing. It unfolds as foam rubber 45. It goes in the bed and they lean the patient against that. Mm-hmm. And she was sitting in that, and she wasn't eating. Mm-hmm. And then she went comatose, and she was non-responsive. So we've got a lot of friends and family in the area, and on a Tuesday morning, I mean, the comatose was on Monday. On a Tuesday, there must have been 30 people here, and we all know each other for decades. We've known each other, and they came in and we're talking. They're hugging each other. They're talking. They're looking at Sandy, talking to Sandy. Sandy's not responsive, but it was a great time with friends and family. And then about that time, a friend came in. She and her husband, who we'd known for decades, again, 30, 40 years, I don't know. And she came in with this boombox and a tape and said, can I play this for Sandy? Well, I said, of course you can. She's right there. So they took the boombox in and they put the tape in it. And Sandy and a bunch of her friends had gotten together and recorded a lot of songs on this. And one of the songs was Amazing Grace. And so they put it at the foot of her bed and they started playing that. Yeah. Well, I got up and I went in there. Now, remember, she's comatose. She hasn't moved for yes. the second day now. And she's sitting there. So I went in and I sat right in front of her on the edge of the bed and got her hand, and I was whispering to her. Everybody else got up, came around, right?
Yeah.
And she's sitting there and the music is playing. All of a sudden, her head comes up. She hadn't moved in 2 days. Head comes up. There's nothing out there. She's looking out in space. So she then turns her head around and sees me, lights up like a Christmas tree. This gleeful look at her face. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, ever. Oh. And I'm looking right at her. And I said, hey, girl, where you been? We missed you. And she's looking right at me, big smile. And then I said, Sandy, you're saying goodbye, aren't you? She looked at me just so gleefully, ran down, and she was gone. Right. That was an incredible moment for this boy.
That is a
And I
really
was so blessed by that woman. I mean, just she's such a giver.
yeah.
And to the very end, to wake up and say goodbye.
You were so blessed, and your friends were so blessed. For her to kind of come through at that moment and say goodbye, what a moving story.
Well, it
Really
was. I mean, it was the most profound moment of my life. And having children is a big deal. Of course, it is. And there are other things along the way,
and to be there with her along every stage. I'm going to use this moment to sort of transition into sort of how did you then approach your work, after Sandy passed away? Like how did you sort of then transition from, you're now a widower, you are, at that time, maybe you were in your 70s. When did you decide that you were going to start a company and, find a solution?
I was doing my postdoc at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and it was in the neurosciences, all right, and the neuroanatomy, which means how the brain is all made up and connected and so forth. And that's what I was doing, and I loved it. This is back in the early 70s, and the Vietnam War is going on. And if you were fortunate enough to have an appointment like as I had, the chances of you being called to go to the rice paddies were pretty low. And as a consequence, a lot of people wanted my spot. Well, there were 600 people wanting my spot. And I was fortunate, and I won't take the time to explain why, but I was fortunate to make a series of discoveries that really sort of put me on the map in that lab, and it was a world famous lab. And the head of that lab
called again, if you wouldn't mind. What was the lab called?
What was the lab called?
Yes, or yeah, what was
it was the Clinton Woolsey lab at the University of Arizona. It was in the med school. Clinton Woolsey really started the neurosciences back in the 1930s. He was the founder of it, and he was a very stately man, just smart as a whip, elegant in his personality and his appearance. And he, if he liked you, that was wonderful. If he didn't, you weren't there very often. And it was a pretty high threshold. I mean, he was serious because he loved his work, and he wanted people in there that were just, the top of the heap. I mean, just world class. And I won't take the time, but I had the fortune of being in the right place at the right time, and that sort of evolved and moved me into a role where I had an opportunity to make a couple of discoveries. I became the talk of the lab, and that moved me along. And I just really had great stuff. That I was working with one coworker who left. He was a year ahead of me. He left. He went to Caltech, and I'll get back to him in a second. And then the other coworker left, who was really my mentor at that lab. He left and went to Vanderbilt and ended up being the professor of the whole psychology department at Vanderbilt. He was a terribly bright guy, a wonderful man. Everybody loved him. And that was the environment that I was in. Well, Sandy developed a tumor in the fibula of her leg, a bone, the small bone in her leg. And it was bone cancer, right? And in a kind that normally is benign, but this turned aggressive. And so I was dealing with the head of the bone work, so to speak, and the orthopod there, and at Wisconsin. They diagnosed it. They saw it. This is before there was MRI or CAT scan, so it really is.
Okay, so this was early on in your marriage.
Oh, mercy, yes. It was. We've been married 5 years, maybe 5 years.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So they discovered this bone cancer.
Yeah, they discovered it, and I said, look, give me a second.
Yeah.
I said, she is my priority.
Yes.
And as much as I love this, and I loved it, okay, yeah. I was, it was a godsend for me to be in that lab with those people. They were so smart, and it was just a great environment, a lot of energy. It was a great place. But Sandy was my priority.
Yeah.
And we were married not long, because we got married and went to Bermuda, and then on honeymoon, and came back and went to Wisconsin. She never got back to Phoenix, where we were married. And so when it was time to deal with this, I decided, Ron, that you're going to have to put her first.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went in and I resigned to do Dr. Woolsey there. So then we moved to Phoenix. Okay? And that transition took me out of the academy and put me into the real world, for which I was not prepared. I mean, I didn't know anything about doing business. And so I moved out of the academy, where I loved, and I'd been there my whole life, right? And all of a sudden I'm dealing with this stuff, and I'd had some classes along the way, statistics and the like, that helped me deal with some of the things.
So right. is this moment when you leave the lab and you guys, Sandy has this bone cancer, would you say this is where it sparked your mission to start, building your own company?
Yeah, but no, it wasn't. I went through a couple iterations along the way. Okay. I wasn't thinking about taking my background of science and creating a company out of it. I came out, and the friends and the family in Phoenix were involved in real estate. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know anything. So, I went to work for a fellow, and I had breakfast with him, and we'd go out and look at his projects, and he was a real estate developer. And I said, look, I don't know anything, but I'll work for you for nothing for 3 months. At the end of that 3 months, if I'm worth something, you can start paying me. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not, you tell me, Ron, you need to do something else. It's just not working out for you.
Yeah.
So I did for 3 months, and I was the first guy in the office, the last guy to leave, et cetera, et cetera. And after 3 months, he decided to start giving me $1,000 a month, and I was tickled pink. All right. I was just so excited. And so that was my venturing into that company. Happened. It grew a lot before I got there. Grew while I was there at 1,500 employees. And my boss, who was a friend of the family and a great golfer. He loved golf more than anything. He said, Ron, my health is failing. I want you to run this thing. And I said, excuse me? You know who you're talking to? You got 1,500 employees. You know who you're talking to? He says, yeah, Ron, you don't have the experience with the smartest guy I got, so it's your job. And I said, oh, okay. And so I learned a lot, and I won't take the time, but the name Peter Drucker comes up. I went off and found him and sat at his feet for a year. I got to learn something about this thing called management, whatever that means. And
what was the name of the company? What was the name of this company that had
it was Taylor Pearson Construction.
Oh, okay.
It was not me. It was he.
Yeah. And how long did you sit in that role for?
I was with him. Oh shoot, I don't know, 3-4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But then he left, and along the way, some opportunities came up that represented some of the kinds of science that I was doing before, not exactly the same as some, and so I got somewhat interested in it, and a lot of it had to do with nutrition, and that wasn't really what I was doing. But at the end of the day, you got this body, and it's affected by a lot of things, by pathogens and so forth, but it's really affected by what you eat. And so I was curious about that and got into that. But where I am today was clearly a consequence of Sandy's evolution, health-wise.
Along your journey with Sandy, at what point did you decide that you had to do something about ALS? Where did that?
Yeah, ALS was a Johnny-come-lately, frankly, because I was pursuing Alzheimer's because of Sandy.
Right. Okay.
And that was my interest, and we were still in Natchez, but we were in the process of packing up and moving to Phoenix. So I said, I looked at Phoenix and I said, I need some people to meet there, and some people I can do business with there. By business, I mean my science, and we can talk about that. I didn't really have the concept of a company at the moment.
Okay.
But that was the genesis of it. And so I found a chap who was the head of the biology at the neurobiology at Barrow Neurologic Institute in Phoenix.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And you know, it's got a great reputation and so forth. And the chap that was leading that up, I sent him an email and a couple articles, and I said, this is the kind of thing that I'm doing. And I sent it to him because I looked at what he was doing, and I tied the two together. And I said, now I'm doing this, and I sent it to him. I didn't say that I knew what he was doing, but sure. I sent it to him, and I said, there's some interesting things that are evolving. Would you like to? Do you have time for a cup? And so he did, and we ended up having a series of 2-hour cups talking about this program. And so I'm spending most of my time. I don't have a lab at the time, but my lab is my computer. I have 4 computers, and these 2 big, 6-foot screens, and that's I would do these searches and then connect the dots. And so I would say, well, the what ifs, and if that's true, then this is true, and that's true, that can't be true. And I was connecting all of these dots, all of this stuff. And as a process, I was formulating in my mind an argument for this. And then I called my friend back up, and I said, Ron, his name is Ron. We need to find a rare disease, because what we're doing, if we can get it for a rare disease, we can get FDA approval rapidly, meaning we don't have to show phase 3 efficacy. We just have to show that it's safe, that the patient is no worse off after treatment than they were before treatment. Mm-hmm. And if we can get that, it's a written law, all right? It's called HUD, Humanitarian Use Device, because we technically process, we take blood out, it's all closed loop. We put it on an IV, take the blood out and put it goes into a flask. Flask snaps into our device, gets treated, no drugs, gets treated, then flows back into the patient. And then we throw all of that away. And the next time we use a new sterile unit. And I said, that's a device that'll qualify. So he came back with a list of I don't know, 50 different names of diseases that I never heard of them. All right.
Okay.
Well, right in the middle was this thing called ALS. Uh-huh. And I said, no, it can't be. ALS can't be rare. And so I got into it, and by golly, it was. The threshold was 8,000. Well, there's about 5,600 a year that succumb to it, and there's about 5,600 a year that get it. And so it's pretty much maintains itself about 30,000, 34,000. So and
this was the specific moment. This was the moment that sparked.
Yeah. It was happenstance in some respects. It was a regulatory solution to my interest. If you want to do that, you got to do this. Okay. And I didn't. And I said to Ron, I said, look, give me a couple of days. I need to get into this and be sure that what we're doing does apply, and technically does apply to ALS scientifically. And it didn't take me 2 days. I mean, I knew the questions to ask and where to drill down and where to go to get the answer. And bang, 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 got it. So I called him back and said, Ron, we're in. It works. And so we went with it. Then he came back and he said, Ron, do you know that we have the number 3 ALS clinic in the world here? And I said, no, I don't know that. He says, the Gregory W. Fulton ALS Clinic. And Gregory W. Fulton was the son of Ira Fulton, a generous man in Phoenix, and got a great heart. And his son, Gregory, got ALS and passed. And so Ira Fulton gave a very large check to Barrow to start this program. And it's now number 3 in the world behind Mass General and Hopkins. So, right there is this great place. Well, then I met, the question from Ron was, do you want to meet Ira Fulton? I said, yes, but not yet. I want to meet the head of the clinic. And he said, fine. And so I was going to go over and see him, but then the COVID police wouldn't let me in the building. So,
oh my gosh, of course.
Yeah, so I went back and we got on the computers and we Zoomed it. Unfortunately, it was fine. And we spent an hour and we did it again. We did it again. And then finally we figured out a way to, well, it was real simple. Went across the street to a restaurant, coffee shop, and spent 2 hours. And there was no COVID police over there. Long story short, the head of that program, Shafiq Lada, he's a Iraqi MD. He's a wonderful man. He's a he's a wonderful clinician, and he's got a great heart, and he's honest, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I can't say anything enough nice about him. Mm-hmm. And so we started working together and talking about what we can do and how we can do it. Long story short, I made him a partner. So he's got a piece of bite of the apple here, and to do this. But he's wonderful. So that's our program, and the foundation was all driven by the regulatory item that if we want to do business, it's going to be ALS. You better find out what that's all about. You know, Lou Gehrig, I never heard of him. I mean, I knew Lou Gehrig, and I knew he was the baseball player that couldn't play anymore and so forth. But I didn't know that stuff. So that was really the genesis of it.
So in simple terms, what makes Hope Neuron different from other approaches to ALS?
Well, I alluded to it earlier, okay? Mm. The solutions are invariably and I'm not being uppity here, and I'm not being critical. I'm just saying matter of fact. When you got a problem, you look for a pill, okay? Yeah. And you go to the doctor, and the doctor's going to give you a pill. I mean, and that's a system, okay? And I said two things. Ron, I'm not smart enough to bring to the table the depth of knowledge that individuals who have been working in this arena for a decade or two that they have, and I can't walk in and Johnny come lately and said, "Well, now what are we doing today? How can I help?" I mean, no, that wasn't the solution. So I took a step back, and my step was very different. I said, the mammalian evolution has been going on for about 300 million years. And humanoid, there's some argument about it, but humanoid has been going on for about 1 million years. Well, we won, okay? The Neanderthals didn't make the cut. You just go all the way through. We're the top of the heap, all right? And so my logic was, okay, in that's not pharmaceuticals that cause that to win. The cells had their solutions to themselves. Mm-hmm. And the cells had the solution. So Ron, get inside of the cells and figure out what's novel about those cells and why they won and the others lost. And that's what I did. And so we have a cell-based therapeutic. It's based on these cells that do the healing. And in the simplest sense is this. The body the term is plastic. It's malleable. And when it is contextually driven, which means the environment surrounding a cell in the body determines a lot of what it does. The genes determine it, and the context around it, the environment, okay? So that drives it. Well, I got into it, and I discovered this thing called M1 and M2. It wasn't my work, but I read other people's work that got me there. And so I started connecting dots again and again. And I said, the M1s are killer cells, the M2s are healer cells, and it's the same cell. It's plastic. Depending on the need, if it's time for killing, it kills, and if it's time for healing, it heals. It's right out of Ecclesiastes, time for everything. And these cells are very plastic. They can do what they do what they're called to do. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was I said, okay, we got to really understand this, Ron. So I read the literature, and I read. I got 20,000 PDFs in my computers at my feet. And so when I say I read a lot, and I make notes on all of this stuff. And
you were doing research. You were doing your research project in your house.
Yeah. M1, M2, and if you got too much M1, you got illness. And what you want is a balance between the two, because there's time to kill and time to heal. But if you're always killing, you're sick. All right, and if you're never healing, you're sick. So you've got to bring the two down into balance. And so then I got into, well, how can we do that? And that our technology really got to the point of answering the question, how can we do that? And yes. that's our bottom line.
You said that you could slow or even stop ALS. So, can you share why you believe this so strongly?
We asked for volunteers, and I'm being facetious here. The only volunteers we could get in the early days were these mice that had transgenically injected genes for ALS. And there were human genes for ALS, and the mice get them. Then the mice die of human ALS. That's what they do. They volunteer and they die. Thank you very much. I'm being facetious, but that's what the deal is. So I got with a neurologist at the Indiana University Med School, Dr. Du, and he's a wonderful man, terribly bright, and really hardworking, etc. I mean, he's a great guy. And so I got with him and laid out a program of what we're going to look for and so forth. So he started working on some of this. And then he came back and he said, Ron, well, first of all, you're getting some really interesting results. He said, secondly, can I join you? And I said, well, I look around and it's pretty lonely right here. So come on in, you'll like the water. And so he joined me, and then we started doing this work and carrying it forward. And yes, I made him a partner. And so we started doing this. Well, then we got in. We started off in cells. That's the first place you go. In vitro, it's called, in cells. And when you confirm it there, then you get into the animals, in vivo, in life. All right. And so we started working on the mice, and these are transgenic mice. They all are going to die with ALS. However, we found that if we treat these mice, and we had to treat them every 2 weeks, they live. And you put a treadmill in there, and they run on the treadmill. They run. Well, if you don't treat them, they run and fall off, die. They don't die from falling off. They die because of the ALS. But if you treat them, they run, and they don't die.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
We started looking inside of that and saying, wow. And I won't get into all the details of why and so forth and so on, but I'm a mechanic, all right? I'm not a clinician. I don't treat people, but I figure out the mechanisms that drive the disease or that can drive the healing. That's what I do. And you don't want me touching patients, all right? But that's what
This is extraordinary. This story is extraordinary. And I love maybe wrapping up right here where we talk about the mice that have been treated run, and they don't die. And then the ones that have been left untreated, they fall off and they die. So what you have created with Hope Neuron, it has proven success.
Well, there's a quick statement I can make to that.
Yes, please do.
I will tell you, as a mechanic, I'm highly confident this will work in people. However, I'm a scientist. I need data. And what I don't know is what's the dosing. And I can't get that without doing it in humans. And we're set up to do that at the Gregory W. Fulton ALS Clinic. All right, the human trial. I'll stop there.
Okay.
And that's what we want to raise the money for. Okay, that's what we want to raise the money for, is to do it in humans. And by the way, the last point on that, this mechanism is not limited to ALS. It's autoimmune neurodegeneration, which includes multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's. You ever hear of Alzheimer's? This is not potentially a little deal. Okay. And we're going to need a lot of help, and want a lot of help from very, very good people, financially and technically, etc. So anyway, that's that. I'll stop.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I think this video is going to be very useful. I would like to record a few more. I think we should do this once a week. I think it would be very useful to potential investors, for our crowdfunding, for our raise, for people that are affected by ALS, Alzheimer's. So thank you very much.